Just a reminder for those of you who are already online, send your questions to me in your Q&A area. It looks like those little bubbles in the icon at top there, okay? Unfortunately, I can't see anybody, so that is the best way to communicate with me. And if you need to let me know to slow down, or you have a particular question, that's the best way to communicate with me, okay? All right. Okay, so let's get started, because we have a 1 hour together, or right up until 10 o'clock, and we have a lot of information to cover. So I'm really excited to share this with you. My name is David Oyadomari again from Ecclesia Capital. I'm guessing most of you this morning are logged in, had already seen the Business Pivot Workshop overview, and we're doing a deep dive this morning on recurring revenue. So hopefully that's what you're here for. That's what I will be covering this morning. I will also let you know that at the end of today's presentation, you will be receiving an email from me. Some of you may have already gotten it because there were quite a number of you. But it's an email with login credentials to the Value Builder system. And there will be credentials, get you to the portal that will allow you to get to the recurring revenue module. This is the series of videos we'll cover today, as well as a recurring revenue or subscription online tool that you can apply to your business. I'm going to show you all of that this morning, but I did want to make you aware that that's on its way. Okay, so you'll be able to go through all of what we're covering this morning yourself at your own pace if you want to review things that we have covered. Okay. So just really a bit of the agenda today, how this is going to work, which is a little different from the broader Pivot Workshop webinar, is that there's going to be some videos we're going to cover today. They're very short, and then there'll be some discussion, which will be via Q&A. So obviously, please go ahead and submit your questions that way. And then I'll go through the tool itself. So this is really supposed to be a hands-on, practical session for you. And we'll have some time for Q&A at the end, hopefully, if we get through all of this in time. And then we'll get through how to get onto the tool itself so you can practice it for your business. So just a quick review, the underpinning, the framework, the system that we're using is called the Value Builder system. It's something that my company uses. And it's done by a guy named John Warlow. And John, again, is someone who is quite famous in the world of business valuation and how to help companies increase the value of their company. He created these 12 different modules that help companies grow the value of their company. And this morning, we're going to focus specifically on this one, what he calls the Automatic Customer Builder, also known as the recurring revenue module. So that's really what we have on tap today. And I'll cover some videos and then I'll share a little bit of kind of a summary of what the video was talking about. And then again, I'll pause for discussion. Okay, so let's get right into it with the video. So bear with me 1 second here. Okay.
In a moment, we're going to talk about how can you create recurring revenue. Right now, I want to talk about why you're going to want to create some recurring revenue as you build the value of your firm. There are a few reasons, but I want to start with increasing the lifetime value of your typical customer. That's something Brian Burkhart and Sanyu Panda have thought a lot about. These guys started a company called H Bloom, which sells flowers on subscription. Now, when I say flowers on subscription, you may be surprised at that because most of us are used to buying flowers from a flower store. And we buy them on Mother's Day and Valentine's Day. And really, we don't buy a lot of flowers throughout the year other than on kind of key special occasions. And when we do buy flowers, it's typically on a one-off. We make a one-off purchase. We certainly don't buy them on a recurring basis. Well, Panda and Burkhart really set out to try to change the way some customers buy flowers. In particular, they were keen on really changing the behavior of hotels and restaurants and spas because they buy flowers on a regular recurring basis. And so they set up H Bloom to sell flowers just to people who buy them on a recurring sort of cadence. And because when a customer buys a contract from H Bloom to supply them with flowers, the typical lifetime value of an H Bloom subscriber is more than $4,000, meaning they make one purchase to have H Bloom supply that hotel or that spa with flowers every 2 weeks. And that equates to more than $4,000 of purchases over the lifetime of that contract with H Bloom. It makes selling flowers a much easier proposition. They can spend more and invest more in sales and marketing because they know that when somebody makes a decision to purchase, the lifetime value of that customer is so much longer and so much beefier than if they just buy them on a one-off basis. Typical flower store purchase in America is $29, compared with the typical purchase from H Bloom, which equates to a lifetime value of more than $4,000. So number one reason I think you want to create some recurring revenue is it creates a tail to your revenue, and the lifetime value of your customers go on and expands tremendously. Staying with H Bloom for a moment, the business is selling these flowers on subscription. The second reason I think you want to focus on recurring revenue is that it makes your business so much more predictable. You know, at H Bloom, they only throw out 2% of their inventory each month compared to the typical flower store that throws out more than 50% of its inventory every month. Why? Well, because it's rotting in the fridge and they've ordered the wrong amount of flowers. Whereas H Bloom, they know how many subscribers they have, and they know that the Westin in Atlanta wants Gerber daisies, and the Marriott in Miami wants roses, and they buy just the number of flowers they need in order to fulfill the subscribers that they have. Now, you may be saying, okay, but I don't have inventory and I don't have to worry about spoilage. But if you employ people, I would argue that you in fact do have spoilage, because those employees come in on a Monday, they expect a paycheck on a Friday. And if you were not able to supply them with work, if you were not able to keep them busy, or in fact, if you overwhelm them with work because you have too much, it can be just as difficult and damaging for your brand and your business. So it's really the predictability of your business that we're striving for when we're creating recurring revenue. The third reason you may want to consider creating some recurring revenue is something that I call the Trojan horse model. And it means that once a customer becomes a subscriber of yours, once they're purchasing from you on some sort of recurring contract, it makes them even more likely to buy additional products and services from you because they have an existing relationship. They know and they trust you, and they have this cadence to your relationship, this momentum, because you're in touch with them every month. You have permission to communicate with them. And it makes them much more likely to buy additional products beyond the ones they've already contracted with you to buy. Let me give you an example. Amazon Prime, 10 million subscribers around the world. You know the value proposition, streaming movies and discount free shipping on a lot of the products that they sell. Well, Amazon has analyzed the typical spend of a Amazon Prime customer and compared it to the typical spend of an Amazon regular customer. So the average Amazon customer, non-Prime subscriber, spends about $600 every year with Amazon. But the average Amazon Prime subscriber spends more than $1,500 a year with Amazon. Now, part of that is because the Amazon Prime subscriber gets free shipping as part of their subscription. But an additional layer is that there's a pre-existing relationship. They're a Prime subscriber. They're paying for Prime once a year. They want to get their value throughout the year, and it makes them more likely to buy additional products and services. And we see that not just with Amazon, but with virtually every subscription company. Once we've got that recurring relationship that's built up over time, it makes us much more likely to buy additional products and services. The fourth, and arguably for our purposes, the most important reason we want you to create some recurring revenue is that it drives up the value of your company. I don't care if you're in a manufacturing business, a retail business, a professional service business, a distribution business. The more recurring revenue you have, the more valuable your company. Now, I'm going to give you a specific example from one specific industry, but rest assured, this trend holds true in virtually every industry. The example I'll share with you comes from the security business. You know, the guys that install security systems in your home or your office. They come in, they install the keypad, they wire up the sensors on the windows. Those companies have two forms of revenue. They've got installation revenue when they come and install the keypads in your home or office. And then they have recurring, or what they call monitoring revenue, the $29 or $39 a month we spend to have them monitor the system. Well, today, the typical acquirer, when they go to acquire a business, will spend much less for the installation revenue. So for example, if you had $1 million company, if you had a gross revenue of $1 million, and all you do is install security systems, you then outsource the recurring revenue to somebody else. All you do is the installation part. Those businesses are trading right now at about 75 cents for every dollar of revenues. So your $1 million security business that just does installations is worth about $750,000 today. Contrast that with a company that just does the recurring revenue. In fact, they outsource the installation, the one-off revenue that nobody wants. All they do is the recurring or monitoring revenue. Those businesses are getting about $2 for every dollar of revenue. So if all you have is recurring revenue and you're generating $1 million in revenue, that business is worth more like $2 million to a potential acquirer, or almost 3 times more than the guys doing the installation work. And again, we see this trend hold true across almost every industry. The more recurring revenue you have, the more valuable your business.
Okay, so let me just recap this a little bit on, what is the goal? What are we trying to get at when John's talking here about the recurring revenue model, and why this is so valuable and important to a lot of our businesses, especially now, I would say, in the pandemic environment. And I would say he mentioned these 4 things, and then I added a couple on the bottom. Number 1 is you create a higher lifetime value of the customer, right? So this goes back to the H. Bloom flower shop example, where the average revenue or value of a customer of a typical shop is like $29, because that person will show up on occasion. You put them on a recurring revenue model, subscription model. They're buying bouquets on a regular basis. You sign them up for a monthly or quarterly subscription plan. In that H. Bloom example, their customers are worth $4,524, right? In other words, the total value of that customer now is so much greater because they're on a recurring revenue model. He also talked about predictability, meaning you have this stable, predictable income stream. And when demand is pretty volatile right now, right? Where we're open, economy's open, it's closed again, it's open. We're not sure who's coming from mainland or around the world to Hawaii. It's highly volatile. So a recurring revenue model, obviously very predictable. It also has an impact on inventory, right? So less spoilage. In the H. Bloom example, again, he's talking about the typical floral shop has a wastage of 50% or more. And that kind of makes sense, I guess, if you think about it. But because they have a predictable model, they know exactly what types of flowers to order and in what quantity. And so they're wasting less than 2%. I'll come back to the Trojan horse model, because I think this is a really, really important point that I want to get across. And the last one John talked about was higher valuation for your company. John's company has tracked over 55,000 different companies that have been bought and sold across the world in different industry types. So when he's talking about the valuation of your company based on certain key principles, he's using statistical models to do that. So when he's showing you that elevator example of 75 cents on the dollar for that implementation only revenue company versus one that does the maintenance at 2 times the valuation of their revenue, he knows what he's talking about. I also will add 2 other things. When you have a subscription model, it'll also allow you to receive payments quicker, because oftentimes your customers might be putting their subscription on a credit card, something that you automatically hit. They don't have to do anything on their side. For any of you who are members of Amazon or Costco or Netflix, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Why is this important? Because in your cash flow, your accounts receivable has now gone from maybe 30 to 45 days it takes for you to get paid, down to maybe like 5. So your cash flow has just become a lot more positive. The other thing is, talk about this recession proofing your business. Now, nothing is perfectly obviously recession proof, but it really makes it a lot more stable of a business when you get into a field that's much more maintenance oriented. Let's take that elevator company, for example. If you were an elevator company that focused mainly on the installation of elevators and there was a recession, guess what happens? People aren't installing elevators that much anymore. They're slowing down their purchases. However, if you were in the business to maintain the safety of an elevator, that's something I think you'll have recurring revenue even through a recession. It's something that people often don't skimp on. Safety is not something they skimp on. So that would be the reason here. Now, let me go back to what I talked about, the Trojan horse model. What John, he kind of really went over it pretty quickly, but I'm going to argue that this is probably the biggest reason to do a recurring revenue model. And why is that? Is because I believe it's a behavioral change strategy. Um, when you develop a model in your business that's built around subscriptions, yeah, it's about the stable revenue, it's about inventory management and all the things we talked about. But that's sort of the short game. The long game is you're actually trying to change the mindset of the consumer themselves to purchase from you. And what do I mean by this? We all know about Amazon Prime and the success that Amazon has had with the Amazon Prime. Now, I think it's $119 a year now. It first started at $79 a year, if you guys remember that. And you think, wow, $79 times a million. Wow, that's a lot of money that Amazon's making. And that would be the short game. But here's the long game. There's a gentleman named by Vijay Ravindran, and Vijay was on the original team that developed Amazon. And he said something really, really fascinating that I want you guys to really catch this morning. He said, Amazon Prime was never about the $79. It was really about changing people's mentality so they wouldn't shop anywhere else. That's what I want you to catch from what John's talking about in the Trojan horse model. And I'm going to share a little bit more about exactly what this means, but I just wanted your wheels to get started to turn in that when you develop a subscription model with your customers, you're essentially building a built-in relationship with them. They're going to have to interact you on a regular basis. And then I'm going to show you how powerful that is truly in your business model. It goes far beyond whatever you're charging them every month or every year for that subscription. It actually goes into a much deeper ability for you to grow that relationship and that value with that customer. Okay, so keep that in mind, and we're going to turn to the next video right now.
So we know that recurring revenue will make your business more valuable. And what I've seen is that acquirers, when they value recurring revenue, they actually look at it and place a different value based on the type of recurring revenue you have, the contractual relationship, if you will, that you have with your customers that buy from you on a recurring basis actually affects the value that acquirers will place on that. And what I've seen is there are 6 different contractual relationships you can forge with your subscribers. I'm going to walk you through the 6 different contract types now so you can get a sense of which ones are most valuable. I'm going to do it like a David Letterman's top 10 list, starting from number 6, the least valuable in the eyes of an acquirer, all the way up to number 1, where we look at the most valuable type of contract that acquirers like to see. So let's start with number 6, consumables. A consumables recurring revenue model simply states that the subscriber or the customer buys from you on some sort of regular cadence because they run out of whatever you sell. So a classic example of that would be coffee. So coffee addicts, of which I am one, have to replenish their caffeine high, usually once a morning, maybe once in the afternoon. Certainly that's my schedule. And as a result of that, we are likely to buy coffee on a regular basis. There's a Starbucks at the end of our street. I happen to go to Starbucks at the end of our street pretty regularly, typically once in the morning, typically once in the afternoon. There's nothing tying me to Starbucks. I could go to one of the other competing coffee shops. It just so happens that I tend to go to Starbucks every morning. And so that is a consumable because I'm running out of whatever it is Starbucks sells. Now, moving up the ladder in terms of more valuable form of recurring revenue is what we call sunk money consumables. And staying with the coffee theme, the best example I can give you is the Nespresso coffee maker, where customers make a purchase in a piece of hardware. They buy the physical coffee maker, the George Clooney advertised coffee maker, and it makes them much more likely to buy the capsules from Nespresso. Now, interestingly, Nestle, the owner of Nespresso, is a smart company. They make the machines, the coffee makers, available through a variety of different distribution channels, right? So you can get them at a big box retailer, you can get them online. What they don't do is make the capsules available so widely, because what Nestle wants is the platform, the coffee maker, distributed as widely as possible, but they want the recurring revenue of the capsules. And so the only place you can buy the capsules is through an Nespresso branded retail store or online at Nespresso.com, because again, their value in this business model is in the recurring revenue. Moving up the ladder in terms of contract types, and the most valuable in the eyes of an acquirer is a subscription. So we've all subscribed. If you've subscribed to a magazine in your life, you know what the subscription model looks like. Typically there's a start date, but there's also an end date to your typical subscription where you've got to make the re-up decision. Number 3 on the form of recurring revenue contract types is what we call sunk money subscriptions. Now, this is a kind of a mashup of a kind of 2 ideas we've already talked about. Sunk money, meaning the customer makes an investment in a platform and they buy on subscription. A good example of that would be the Bloomberg terminal, where Wall Street traders buy the physical hardware that sits on their desk, so they've sunk money into a platform. And then they buy Bloomberg's information on a recurring basis. And so they're much stickier as subscribers, because if they're going to give up their subscription to Bloomberg, this big piece of hardware that's sitting on their desk is no longer valuable. So it makes them even stickier and therefore more valuable in the eyes of an acquirer. Number 2 on this list of contract types is what we call auto renewal subscriptions. Now, this is very similar to number 4, subscriptions. The only difference is that they auto renew. There is no formal re-up date in the future. These are much more valuable forms of subscriptions to acquirers because there is no end date, and therefore the revenue goes on into the future until the customer cancels. Good example of that would be any software you bought in the last few years is typically on a recurring evergreen model. In the kind of offline world, you might look at someone like an Iron Mountain, who will store documents for you. And they don't call you up every month and say, would you like us to continue to store the documents? They just store the documents for you on a forever basis. You have to either call them and tell them to ship them back or shred them. Otherwise, they're going to bill you and continue to store your documents. That's an auto renewal subscription. Now, the most valuable form of subscription in the eyes of an acquirer is a multi-year contract, where the contract stipulates that the customer must continue to buy from you. So for example, when most wireless carriers launched the iPhone was such a desirable product, so much hype in the marketplace about this brand new phone with all these new features. There was so much hype that the wireless providers, AT&T Mobility in the United States, forced their customers into a 3-year contract that they couldn't get out of, because they knew that customers would be willing to buy that, and they knew that their stock price in return would be based on its contract value. And that's going to be the most valuable form of recurring revenue. If you can get multi-year contracts from your customers, then an acquirer will be able to see that that revenue is guaranteed to perpetuate beyond your tenure as the
owner. Okay. So you'll hear, John is talking about, I don't know if you caught that, he often refers to the value in the eyes of an acquirer. And I just thought I should spend just a minute or so or less to explain what the mindset of that is, right? So the basic premise of the value builder system is that the most objective view of what creates value in your company is what is it worth to someone you're going to sell it to. And even if you're not in the market to sell your business, it's an objective way to look at your business, right? Because how do you know what a business is worth? Whatever someone's willing to pay for it, right? And so that's, if you caught that and you're wondering, what's he talking about, acquire? I'm not trying to sell my company. I just want to make sure that was clear. So I just want to see, I'm going to recap what the 6 transaction types of the hierarchy of recurring revenue. And then I'm going to pause and look for any questions in the Q&A area. So go ahead and start firing that off if any you have any questions right now. But I'm going to go from bottom to top, just like John did. And basically, he started with the consumable model. The consumable model is, as we all know, it's like Starbucks. So it's a recurring revenue, but you're really not locked in. You could go to Honolulu Coffee Company on a day, or you could even go to McDonald's or Dunkin' or something like that to get your caffeine fix for the day. There's nothing that's obligating you to go there, but you do go there on some regularity. Then he talked about Nespresso, which my family owns a machine. And this is where once we bought the machine, you're a little obligated to buy the pods now, right? That's the whole point. And then going up the hierarchy, he talked about subscriptions. This is what we're very familiar with for ages and ages. This is a magazine. In fact, do you know that the first recurring or subscription model in the world that's been recorded was back in the 1500s, when map makers would ask people to subscribe to their maps, because this is when the new lands were being discovered on a somewhat regular basis. Geopolitical environment would change continually. And so wealthy individuals and families would pay map makers a subscription because they always wanted the latest map. Similar, that's kind of the idea behind our magazine subscriptions. It works the same way. Then he talked about the sunk money subscription. It's very similar, except that like an Nespresso, you've bought something. And this is like the Bloomberg terminal. For those of you not aware, people in finance, they have a terminal that they buy. It gives them all the financial information of the markets, the stock markets, the bond markets. And what it does is you have to subscribe to the software in order to get the information loaded on your terminal. Auto renewal is what he talked about. It just automatically renews. If you don't tell them to stop, it'll just continue. And then the highest form, is which I think just about every single one of us is very familiar with, is the wireless carrier, right? This is the one where they lock you in for 2 years. And if you cancel, you still got to pay the remaining balance. So that's what he's getting at there. This is the hierarchy of recurring revenue. You want to go as high up the chain as possible. That's the most value it brings to your company. Okay, so let me pause there. I'm going to look in the Q&A. Does anybody have any questions? I do not see any questions, so I'm going to assume we can keep moving on. Okay. Switching gears a little bit, I talked about the Trojan horse model as really a human behavior change strategy. So how do you change human behavior in a subscription model? And so I'm going to share this with you a little bit before we turn to the next video segment. And essentially it's this. Number one is people want to get their money's worth once they buy your subscription. So the economists call this sunk cost. And the reason why they call it sunk cost is because they know that normal human behavior does not treat it as sunk cost. Okay, what do I mean? If I spend $119 on Amazon Prime, the psychology of it is that although I should think of that as sunk cost, meaning I've already spent it, so what's the difference? The normal human psychology works where I'm going to say like, oh, now that I spent $119 for Amazon, I'm going to maximize that as much as I possibly can. I got to get my money's worth is the idea, right? So what do I do? So what VJ was saying, the guy who worked at the original Amazon Prime, he actually went into more detail about what they were trying to build. Is that they knew at Amazon when they first created Prime. Remember, it wasn't about the $79 at all, right? It made some money, but what they're really after was so that you would only use Amazon to shop. And that was the key why it was free shipping with your Amazon Prime membership. Because what they really wanted you to do is they wanted you to say, well, since it's free shipping on Amazon, that's the first place I'm going to shop for anything I can think of that I need, right? Like, oh, uh, we need some light bulbs for the house, okay? Or maybe even toilet paper because Costco was run out during the craziness at the beginning, right? Or, I need new running shoes. Guess what people are doing? They're going directly to Amazon first. Why? Because shipping is free. And for most companies, especially independents, they can't afford to send shipping for free, right? They don't have the scale. So right off the bat, if you've bought Amazon Prime with the free shipping, you might be getting, especially if you live in Hawaii, 15 or 20% discount because you're not paying for the shipping. And what started to happen is the people would grow their behavior and start to buy more and more things on Amazon. A very good example of this is Amazon had a grocery delivery service. I think they called Amazon Fresh or something like this, that they started in the Seattle area. And what it was originally was a service to, you pay a fee to get your groceries delivered to you. Then something really interesting happened when Amazon went to Los Angeles with that same service. Instead of charging people for each delivery, they charge them a subscription. For X dollars a year, you would get free deliveries over $35, an order that was $35 or more. And then they saw this thing take off. That is the concept behind get your money's worth, right? I think we all realize this. If ever you were that person who bought that, let's say that concert ticket, and it was like $150 each ticket, and you had 2 tickets, okay? And then just so happened on the day of the concert, the weather was horrible, and it was raining, and it was pouring, and it was miserable. And oh, what if your concert was at the Waikiki Shell or Aloha Stadium and it was outdoors, right? Some people would be like, I'm not gonna go. Many go anyway. Why? Because I already spent the $300. I might as well get something for it. That's the concept here. I'm gonna get my money's worth no matter what. That's a really powerful thing when you think about creating your subscription models. Think about it's not just the dollar value you're getting, but you want to make sure that it's this behavior shift that you're encouraging. The second thing is this: when you have a subscription model and you're starting to see the repeat behavior of your customers, do not let the data about what your customers are buying and how often they're buying go without you taking advantage of that. Because what the smart subscription providers are doing is they're looking very carefully at the behavior patterns of these repeat purchases, and they're modifying and improving their products so that they can customers can express their individuality. We live in a world today where more than ever, people are able to say, I really like this particular type of thing. It's not a one size fits all world anymore. And so the businesses that will outcompete are the ones who can create individualized products for particular segments of their audience, right? And they're doing this because they have the data and they're harvesting the data to improve their products. The good example of this are those that provide those those box delivery subscriptions that arrive at your door. They pay very close attention to what people actually buy in those boxes and return the rest, right? Because then that's how they improve their products and their inventory and get better and better at it. The third thing you do to change behavior in a subscription model is to provide access where there's scarcity. So part of this is looking at what you offer, products and services, and you try to determine, is there scarcity or is this something that people can get anywhere else? To the extent they can get it anywhere else, you've got to find scarcity or you've got to manufacture scarcity, right? So that you can provide this limited access, right, to something that everybody wants. Why are there country clubs in the world today, right? Why does Wailea Country Club and Oahu Country Club and Honolulu Country Club exist? Because it's limited access, it's scarcity. It's not a public good that anybody can go to, right? And because of that, people are willing to pay a premium every single year, every single month. Number 4 is, how responsive does your product or service need to be? And this is really important too, because we know this, such as, let's say, you want to be sure that when your computer crashes, that you need to get a response from your outsourced IT provider within 2 hours or less, because your business depends on it. Well, in that scenario, guess what that IT service provider will do? They will sell a premium subscription package for a 2-hour response time. Everybody else, they will get to when they can. So again, to the extent that you can have, or you have a product that requires and people value high levels of responsiveness, that's something you're going to build into your subscription plan. Number 5 is, does your product or service create some sort of network effect? Now, what do I mean by this? So a network effect is a product or service that increases in value the more people join. So a classic example would be like all the social media platforms like Facebook, right? What makes Facebook valuable is the fact that everybody's on it, right? What would this product or platform be if you've gone on and it was crickets? So that's not valuable at all to me. But to the extent that your product or service creates a network effect, it increases the value of it, and you can begin to charge a subscription for access to that network, right? Number 6, with subscription models, there's been failures out there in the world, where there was this one company that was selling men's underwear on a subscription. Okay, so like every month you would get new underwear. Okay, and I don't know about you guys, but I don't change my underwear every single month. Okay, that would be a very unique case. It's a product or service that has a shelf life, right? That has to be replaced, that is more apt to be a good subscription model. Okay, like another bad example is, let's say you had a subscription model for pianos. How often do people buy pianos? Okay, so that's something I want you to think about as you develop your subscription plan and your model. Is there a shelf life for what we're selling? And if there's not a obvious shelf life, it's time for you to communicate that there is one. A good example is, I have a client he's actually a estate planning attorney. And what's been very fascinating to me as I've learned about the estate planning business is that the mistake a lot of clients make is they spend all this money in creating their trust, okay, the trust documents. And then they check it off their list and they forget about it. And that trust document, lo and behold, goes pretty much like it gets old and outdated, certainly within 3 years. Why? Because the laws have changed. Maybe someone who was in the trust and named the trust has passed on. Maybe there's a family relationship that something went wrong, and now that person you were planning to give something to, you're like, not so much anymore. I don't know. Life happens, right? And that trust document that you were so good at getting done just expired, so to speak, right? So some of the things I've been talking with him about is how do you communicate to people that even trust documents have a shelf life? That someone needs to be reviewing this on a somewhat regular cadence, right? That is part of what the subscription model is about. And number 7 is find carry value. Okay, what does this mean? Whatever the person is buying, is important to find out how important is that to them. If like a good example might, or a good question to ask is, if that product or service was stolen or lost, would that be devastating to that customer, right? Whatever that product or service is. So like my Coca-Cola bottle that I was drinking this afternoon, someone lost it, someone stole it, or I left it somewhere. I'll be pretty disappointed, but it doesn't really bother me that much, right? But let's say it's something, a product or service that's really, really important to me. Let's say it's it's in my home. Let's say that I have like a gardening problem in my home, right? Like weeds pop up, and I have all of this. Like it would really devalue the price of my property if I don't maintain the landscaping pretty well. Well, that's really valuable to me, and so I would pay money and a subscription to have the maintenance folks come in, the landscapers to come in and take care of my property and the landscape on a regular basis, right? So that's the mentality I want you folks to have, is to assess what's the value of this, and the higher the value, the more likely you'll be able to charge like a type of insurance policy for that particular product or service. Okay, so I'm going to pause there. I'm going to look for some questions and make sure this behavior change concept is clear. Okay, so I'm going to look at a question here from someone, Kim. If we have a product that checks all of these 7 boxes on change behavior in a virgin market, how do we create a sales funnel that works to scale? Wow, that's a really good question. Um, so so the scalability question is a slightly different question to me than recurring revenue in and of itself. And I don't want to necessarily push you off, but I will for the time being. I do have a deep dive on scalability that is planned for, help me out, Gina. I want to say it is the 23rd, November 23rd. I think we're going to go over that. Oh, sorry, November 16th at 1 p.m. We'll talk specifically about scaling, and I would encourage you to register for that. However, to give you a preview of what that is, okay, is that when I talk about scalability of business functions like sales, I ask my clients to look at it across 3 dimensions, and those are TVR. Is it teachable? Is it valuable? And is it repeatable? Okay, and so teachable means is that a particular function, so in sales, that you can teach someone to do. So if you have a product or service that it should be, hopefully, something that you can easily teach a salesperson to do, then that would score high on the T. V would be something that would be how valuable is it for you, the business owner, to hold on to that particular function. Like you have to sell it because it's such a very specific, complex type of product or service that you have to be the one to deliver it. That would actually detract away, right, from that ability to scale it. And then repeatable would be how often or repeatable is that function. And then you go across that. And then the more repeatable it is, the more valuable it's going to be for you to outsource it and scale it that way. So hopefully that answers your question a little bit. However, I would just say to you that that's one technique. The basic principle, though, I would say in scale, in the business of scale, is that oftentimes businesses that I've found will start selling one product And then they have a customer that says, wow, you're so good at this. Could you also sell us this? And then you start to add maybe one, started as one product that you're really good at. You start to sell 2, 3, 4, 5 products. And then you start to be a company that sells many products to the same customers. Okay. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. What I will say though is it's more valuable and more scalable to sell one product to many customers than many products to a few. So as you go through that product, Kim, for those recurring revenue, I would say zoom in on how to make that one product really unique, really different in the marketplace, and then how you can make it teachable and less valuable in terms of your involvement, and highly repeatable, and then it will scale. Okay, so hopefully that answers your question. If not, we can also talk further on that 16th, or just go ahead and email me after this as well. Okay, let's now talk about the next video, which will talk about the 9 different subscription models. John is not going to cover all 9. He doesn't have time for that in the video. He'll touch upon the first few, and then I'll cover the rest of the 9 for you. Okay, so let's cover that now. This is the 9 different models of subscription models. So get you to think about which applies to your business. Okay, let's go here. Here we go.
Okay, so you know that recurring revenue is going to make your business much more valuable. The key question, though, is how do you create a recurring revenue model, maybe in an industry or company type that doesn't really lend itself to recurring revenue? You know, if we're a software business, sure, everybody understands software as a service and charging on a monthly basis. But for you, you might be in an industry that doesn't naturally lend itself to a recurring model. And so what we're going to talk about in this module is the fact that there are 9 unique recurring revenue models. In a moment, you're going to have a chance to read a white paper that describes in detail all of the 9 models. And I believe that virtually any business in almost any industry can create at least some form of recurring revenue. Just to give you a sense of the breadth of possibilities, I want to talk about 3 models, but rest assured there are 9 in total, and all of them are in the white paper you're about to read. First model I want to talk about is what we call the simplifier model. And the simplifier model simply states that for a lot of customers who buy from you on a reasonably regular cadence, it's a hassle to continue to remember to call you to buy from you. And you'd actually be removing one thing off their to-do list if you actually just simplified the process and said, you know what, we'll come and do this anyways until you tell us to stop. And my favorite example of that is a little company called Mosquito Squad in the business of exterminating mosquitoes. And if you know anything about extermination companies, whether they're dealing with rats or mice or cockroaches in your basement, they work typically on a sell-do model, right? So they sit around, they run advertising, they hope that when you Google rats in my basement, their ad pops up in natural search listings, and they spend all their money trying to advertise to you. Well, Mosquito Squad did a different thing. They said, you know what, we're going to sell mosquito eradication services on a recurring basis. Because once customers call and notice they've got a mosquito problem, it's often too late to eradicate the mosquitoes. The problem with mosquitoes is you've got to deal them at the egg stage. You've got to actually spray before they hatch their eggs and become a mosquito. If you deal them with them when they're just eggs, you can kind of eradicate them relatively easily. But the problem is customers forgot to call until they had a problem, by which time it was too late. And so Mosquito Squad said, no, we're going to make this simpler for our customers. We're going to sell annual contracts. And so now when you want Mosquito Squad to deal with your mosquitoes, they don't come on a one-off basis. They sell you an annual recurring contract where they're going to spray an EPA regulated formula 9 times throughout the year. They're going to do it without you even knowing they've come in many cases, other than the door knocker they leave on your door at the end of the spray. So they're going to do that on a recurring basis. So Mosquito Squad contracts recur at a rate of 70%. And so the Mosquito Squad business managers know where their revenue is going to come from next year and the year after that, based on these recurring spraying contracts they've got. Again, that's in stark contrast to the typical model for most bug eradication or most rodent eradication businesses that wait for the phone to ring. Number two on the list of recurring revenue models is what we call front of the line subscriptions. The front of the line subscription model is where you sell access to the front of your service queue. We've all become fairly comfortable, many of us, I should say, have become fairly comfortable with this idea of paying to jump the queue, right? So if you've taken your kids to Disney World in the recent past, you know that you can buy a fast pass, which basically jumps the queue of the people that don't have the fast pass. In many states, you can actually now buy access to the HOV lane, not by driving a Prius, but by just paying the bill. Many of us, when you travel, you probably go to a special counter if you've got a special card that you buy, which gives you a faster access to check-in lines and so forth. We've become quite comfortable with this notion of buying to jump the queue. And this provides a business opportunity for any business with customers, in particular those customers for whom downtime would be catastrophic. One example of that is Adobe. Adobe used to sell their software on a perpetual basis. So you buy the software and you own it forever. And they recently made an announcement where they were moving to a subscription business model where you would pay Adobe on a regular recurring basis. They got all sorts of bad publicity about this decision. What was very interesting for us as observers of their subscription models is that Adobe has actually been selling subscriptions for more than a decade before they sold their first software subscription. Adobe has been selling for more than a decade service packages which allow access to the front of their service queue. So if you're a regular Adobe customer and you've got a problem, you can submit a claim or ticket and you might get a response a week later. But if you've got a service package, you can get preferential treatment. And so for you and your business, ask yourself, what does downtime mean to my customers? And is there a cohort of my customers for whom downtime is catastrophic? Those are the types of customers that might buy a subscription where for X amount of dollars a month, you have special access to a service queue or a service window. The third form of subscription model is a consumables model where a customer has something that runs out and they need to buy them on some sort of regular cadence. A good example of that is Dollar Shave Club selling razor blades. You know that these razor blades, we obviously run out of razor blades, and many of us are sick and tired of walking down to the drugstore, the grocery store, the pharmacy to buy the blades, the replacement blades, only to find out that the manufacturer of the blades has changed the handle and you've got to buy a new handle. And so Dollar Shave Club picked up on this frustration among a lot of customers and saying, you're going to have to replenish your razor blades every once in a while, and we're going to do that on a regular cadence. And so here with this model, you're looking for your customers that have something that runs out, some sort of element of what you sell that is a consumable, and you can set that up on a subscription basis. I'm sharing these three examples with you not to provide you an exhaustive list of all the types of recurring models you could look at, more so to say, open your mind, no matter what industry you're in, whether you're in manufacturing, distribution, retail, open your mind to the idea that you can create at least some form of recurring revenue in your business. And again, it's going to help drive up the value of your business and make it much more predictable.
Okay. So as I mentioned, he didn't go over all 9 models. He just wanted to get it started. But all of you today will get an email from me with login to the Value Builder system. There will be in there a module 5, which is recurring revenue. You can watch all these videos again. But you will also have access to what he referred to as the white paper of 9 subscription models. So you can go through all of that. If you wanted to read what these 9 subscription models are, you can go to my website as well, ecclesiacapital.com/9 models. And in this, I explain what each of these are. And it'll help you think about your product and service and which one it fits in. In the online system, the login credentials that I'm sending you, there is also the online tool that you answer 6 to 8 questions, depending if you have a product or service. And based on answering those questions, the system will automatically generate and tell you which of the 9 models are best fit for your business or product or service, right? So just, I'll touch upon this real quick. I think we do have a minute or so to do this. The network model I talked about, right, which is like a Facebook, it does improve as people join this. The private club model, which I think is pretty self-explanatory, but like a country club. Surprise box would be something like Stitch Fix. This is the type of box where you don't know what's going to be in the box, but it arrives and you're like, oh wow, right? And so there's a whole nother mentality of that. All you can eat library model is like Netflix, right? So if you have all this content in the background, front of the line is, again, like the airlines is a good example, that if you have a particular card, with an annual fee, credit card with an annual fee, you can go into like boarding group 2 instead of, wait for boarding group 4, stuff like that. Membership website model. This is a paywall, very similar to those of you who have subscribed to, let's say, the Star Advertiser, something like that, Wall Street Journal, New York Times. Simplifier model is just that this happens, like he talked about, like the mosquito company. They just show up, and or the piano tuner that comes to my house, right? They just take care of it. I don't have to schedule it. Doesn't bother me. Doesn't consume my thoughts. Consumables model he talked about, like the Dollar Shave Club, and then the peace of mind model. And I think the one that comes to mind for this is if you have some sort of insurance like Apple Care or maybe LoJack, you guys might remember. That's what those are. Okay, and then we don't quite have time for this. There is an FAQ video that you can watch. There are, I think, 3 FAQs there that John will cover in the online portal. I just want to leave you with a couple of things. One is there are some caveats here. Okay, subscription models aren't the silver bullet. Nothing is, as we know. But I want to point out a couple of things to just kind of make sure when you implement your subscription models, you keep these things in mind. And number one is if you're collecting revenue upfront for your services, and then you're going to move it into a monthly subscription, your cash flow will then be spread out. Okay, so the great example of this is back in the day, you guys might remember when you bought Microsoft Office, you bought it as one bundle, right? You paid X $100 for that. Where they're shifting to is you actually pay now software, you buy it on a monthly basis. So instead of paying, let's say, $360 from Microsoft, now you're spending like $30 a month. Important because your cash flow now has to be spread across 12 months and you're not getting it in one hit, okay? Unless you do like an annual subscription, okay? But just something to think about, because you might choose an annual subscription, a monthly subscription, a quarterly subscription. Just know that you're gonna have to balance cash flow in that regard. Also, caveats is when your product does or is not, like we talked about some of this already, if it does not have an obvious shelf life, if it's not scarce, maybe it doesn't require a high level of responsiveness, or you're not improving your product relative to your competitors because you're not really paying attention to the customer data. And then the last point is if the cost of acquiring the customer is not being covered by more than 3 times the value, the lifetime value of this new customer, this is starting to look a little dicey. Meaning that just because you flip your product or service to a subscription doesn't automatically mean that this is the perfect road to success. You're still going to have to calculate what is the acquisition cost of each customer and compare that to what is the value of the customer that you've acquired. And you compare that ratio. And the general rule of thumb is when the value of the customer is 3 times or more than the cost to acquire that customer, you're good. Anything less than that, you need to be cautious. Certainly anything less than 1, you may want to shed that product or service entirely. Okay, so again, just to recap here, here's my email address. If any questions come up after this, you will be getting an email from me with the subject line, the Value Builder Engagement Program. Welcome to the Value Builder Engagement Program, Recurring Revenue. That will have your login credentials to this module that we reviewed here together. You will get the videos on recurring revenue. You'll get what's called the Automatic Customer Builder tool, which is the answering the 6 to 8 questions to then it'll automatically tell you, here's of the 9 models, which one's best fit for you. And it'll have something called the lifetime value, or LTV, to customer acquisition cost, CAC calculator. When you answer this question, it'll come up with a ratio. And again, you're targeting a 3-to-1 ratio. Okay. Your login credentials, because you were ahead of the game and signed up for this deep dive, will be valid for you for free until the end of this year. Okay, so with that, we're at the top of the hour. Man, there were so much things to cover. If you have any additional questions for me, any feedback as well, please feel free to shoot it out to the Q&A or send me an email. Just want to thank you for your time. Hope this was of help to you folks. I really, my company and all the folks who work in my company, we really do this because we're really just trying to help local businesses get through this stronger. So best to you, and I hope to see you in the next deep dive and around town. Aloha.